Hello, welcome to the Northeast Kingdom Voice. I'm your host, Scott Wheeler. When you think of foresters, you think of the men and women who roam the forest, helping the loggers out, preparing for them to harvest the trees. But most foresters also have a keen sense of humor. When you think of George Buzzell, you can't help but think of humor. George was a man that many of us knew, and although he has passed, we still like to talk about him. Today's guests are three people who remember George with great fondness, and they're also working to make sure his memory lives on forever. I'd like to introduce my guests. On the far left is
Fern Fontaine. I teach natural resources at the North Country Career Center. I've known George for many years. I was a farmer prior to becoming a teacher, and he helped out with the spruce bollworm epidemic we had in Greensboro in the late 70s. I always love to have him come up, not only for his expertise, but my kids really like to have him come up because his humor came out there as well, and that's George. That's who I remember him as. He's also on my advisory board in my natural resources program, and very much cared about students' education.
And Rebecca, when you look at this photo, what do you think of when you see that?
Well, this photo was taken of my father, George Buzzell, at a wedding anniversary party for Dave and Marlene Wood, who are related to us by marriage. And just that, the smile on his face is so much a part of who he was throughout his entire life. And certainly he didn't lose that smile right until the very end.
Right. And how many children are there in the family?
There are 4 of us in the family. The oldest is my brother Roy. I have a sister, Patricia, another brother, Paul, and then the youngest, that would be me.
You're the baby, Rebecca Brown.
Yes.
I'm Colleen Goodridge. I've always been an Orleans County resident. Born and brought up in the area, lived on a dairy farm. My folks are still in Irisburg, Wayne and Betty Doncaster, on their 450-acre dairy farm. Mm-hmm. George was the first consulting forester that had anything to do with looking over the land and advising them as to how to manage that land. And I must say, from my early age, with George's care and attention to what was there, I'm sure that the values that I have on forest stewardship are with me today. So my parents are still there, 80 and 87. My brother is carrying on the farm, and we have the next generation there as well. So George has touched 3 generations right there in Irisburg. Little did I know that I would become owner and operator of Goodridge Lumber in Albany, which I own and operate with my 3 sons. Have been for 38 years, and we would meet George again in the capacity of a consulting forester. The local cedar that we use is harvested within a 70-mile radius, so we work closely with George on properties within the area. And when people look back at their lives and think of some that have had a great impact, I would say George is one that has an impact on my life. At his retirement, we found out bits and pieces about George that we might not all have known about. And at his moving on, his passing through the memorial services and talking with our neighbors, we really realized how George has touched many of us, not just in Orleans County, but throughout the state, throughout the U.S. and Canada as well.
Now, have you ever found a forester that was boring, though? Because in my travels, I don't know which one came first. Did you have to have a sense of humor to become a forester, or did you spend too much time in the woods by yourself? Did it make you have a sense of humor? Because I knew George, And I also knew his counterpart, Jersey Drown, and they had very much the same dry, not slapstick sense of humor. It was the true Vermont humor. Have you ever found a boring forester?
I haven't. I went to school to become a forester, and maybe I'm boring, but maybe I'm not. Maybe I've become a character like these guys as well. Ray Foles was a county forester before George Buzzell, and he was much the same as George. So when George became county forester in the mid-'60s, he very much took the place of somebody just like him. And I've worked with a lot of foresters in my capacity as a teacher, but also as a farmer, and they all have that sense of humor. And I think it's being out in nature, but they see the whole picture. They just don't see part of the picture. I think George was a very varied individual, very many things that he could do well and really cared about. And the environment was only part of that. He cared about people as well as for their forest, but also for themselves. I mean, that's who George was, and he knew a lot about other parts of agriculture besides forestry. That's who George was, and I think most foresters are that way.
Okay. And who was your father as a father?
My father was a remarkable man. He worked very hard. So in today's culture, people might have perceived him as sort of a workaholic but it wasn't always by choice. He would receive phone calls early in the morning, late at night, and was always asked questions constantly whenever he would go out in public of people who needed to hear what he had to say and take advantage of his knowledge. And for the most part, he gave all of that knowledge freely, openly, willingly. I say for the most part because occasionally he liked to sleep, and the public didn't always allow for that. So very generous, giving man, very intelligent. His grasp of language was phenomenal. His love for literature, for music, for art. He was a wonderful supporter of the arts at the high school and beyond, and actually quite an accomplished musician in his day. So he had many facets of who he was, and I believe you were referring to the sense of humor. The thing he loved most was being out in nature, with the trees, with the wildlife. He really felt very strongly about that, and I think that's part of how he was able to remain joyful.
Okay, so here's a photo with him out in nature.
Yeah.
And what is he doing here?
Well, summer, winter, it didn't matter when, he would be out in the woodlots marking trees, but he knew, as good loggers know, that if you're going to take a tree out of a woodlot, you should do it when the ground is the least vulnerable. So this is a tree he had taken down, and as you can see, it was taken in winter, so it could be removed from the woodlot with minimal damage. And he had taken a series of photos, this being one of them, that he then used to create an educational layout that he used to go around and do seminars.
Right. Now, the one thing people might remember about him also is the way he hated his fields. He didn't have one of those big old whopper choppers come in. And here's another photo of him. What is this all about?
Well, my father, we did occasionally use equipment to hay our fields, but he maintained about 10 acres of field, and for a lot of that time he mowed with a scythe by hand. Sometimes he would then feed it out as green feed. Sometimes he would then hand us dowel rakes and pitchforks and invite us to help him get the rest of the hay off the field. toward the last 10 years or so of his field management, he actually pioneered the use of BCS walk-behind tractor in this region. So the good news is it had a sickle bar, and it had a rake, and it had a mower. So you could rake and mow without a dowel rake. The bad news is you really had to walk behind it.
Now, why did he do this? Did he like to do this to be different, or why did he do it?
I think there were many reasons. First of all, for him, his job could be very stressful. As I said, there were very few places he could go where somebody wouldn't ask him a work-related question. But when he was out in the field, people really had to track him down to ask those questions. And sometimes that did happen, but very rarely. So it gave him an opportunity to get out, get some exercise, have some time in nature, which he loved. It also is the lowest impact harvesting method for hay.
So do you harvest your lawn the same way your father harvested his?
Now, when I bought my first lawn mower after moving back up here, I consulted with my dad, and I bought one of those walk-behind real mowers, because it's the lowest impact, it's good exercise. A month later, I bought a push mower with a motor.
Now, your parents passed on really close to each other, didn't they?
About a year apart.
Right. Now, who went first? Your mother?
My mom went first.
That must have been tough for him.
It was. I really think that he didn't even realize what a precious treasure he had until my mom was gone. And
you remind me of your mother.
Well, thank you. But he realized and missed her a great deal. People who spent time with him after her passing would, if they stood still long enough, he would pull out pictures of when they were courting, when they were getting married, when they were first married, when they were traveling together, and just show picture after picture of the two of them together.
Did she ever hay the field with him?
Oh, yes.
She was invited as well, huh?
She was cordially invited. However, a lot of the time, as Fern said, he wasn't just interested in forestry. He was also interested in every aspect of agriculture, which went to chickens, pigs, cattle. So rather than haying the fields, sometimes it was that my mother was inside plucking the chickens that had just been...
That's not a pleasant job either.
Yes, so she got to enjoy the harvesting.
So the last photo showed your father wearing a hat. Now, is this his hat or just a replica?
This is one of his. This is one of his. And haying in the hot sun, you could always see him wearing a straw hat. We actually have a small collection of them, and I have pictures of my son at about 7 years old, manning the BCS mower, the walk behind, wearing this hat.
Has any of his grandchildren inherited his sense of humor?
Yes.
Do you ever hear anything come out of their mouths that you say, that's Dad speaking?
I do. I live with one of those.
So what is it that you folks are trying to do now with his memory?
When George passed, he had been on my advisory board since '96 when I started teaching at North Country Career Center. I very much valued his input, his thoughts on where our programs should be doing, and always came and talked to the students and showed his value for education, explained to them how valuable that would be to my students, and that had a great impact on all my students. And so when he passed, I thought, what a way to pass on his legacy through educating other students. So I talked to my advisory board and I talked to the family and told them I wanted to start a scholarship fund in his name. And for the last 2 years we've been working on it. So this is where we're at today, where we have everything established, where we want to start. And I know a lot of people have told me, says, I want to give some money towards this scholarship in his name. And so we had been working on it, and within the last month, this is what we came up with. It's finally here, and now we're in the process of letting everybody know, not only here in Vermont, but throughout the United States. He was involved in other parts of the United States, and when we had our symposium in Greensboro on the spruce budworm, people from Canada were there, and George knew everybody. And my kids love to go, my students love to go to his place and see what he was doing there. He very much had an active process of checking out his trees, the growth rate, et cetera, and the kids could see that. And so I had a student on my advisory board at the time, and he says, what a great way of doing this. And he, it's too late for him for the scholarship, but he helped work in putting the scholarship together along with Colleen and other members.
So what do you think, Rebecca, about what they're doing?
I think that my father would be honored and really pleased. He valued education tremendously and always was willing to help people, particularly if he saw somebody with potential and who was willing to put forth effort. Sometimes he would surreptitiously find ways to present people with gifts, ways to help them out.
Right.
So I think this would be really meaningful to him.
He could also put a scare into people too, couldn't he, Colleen? You were telling me a story that he had a sense of humor, or maybe not a scare, but he could tell a story that would make you just like.
He could tell stories, and you didn't really know that he was telling a story. He would drive up in the mill yard and get out of his little car with his toque on and come across the yard and say, did you hear about this? And I'd say, well, no, what? And he'd go on and never a smile, and he'd let me think about a minute, and I'd say, George. And this grin would come, and then he might say, well, have a good day, and drive off. So you never knew how to take him, but we always enjoyed that car driving in, and George.
It was funny. I just thought of this as shortly before your father passed, I was at Applebee's in North Conway, and somebody heard somebody saw our license plate, Vermont, and they came over and they said, do you know George Buzzell? And it happened to be one of his former class. Now, where did he grow up?
He was born in Warren, Vermont, and then moved to the New Hampshire side.
Right.
But while they were living in Lyme, New Hampshire, right near Hanover, he actually went to Thetford Academy. Right. So he finished his high school education in Vermont, and then went to University of New Hampshire, and then went out to Montana for more education.
This person just happened to see us, and and it was one of his former classmates. Mm-hmm. And as I was telling you before the show, the ironic thing is you hadn't known anything about it, but within like 3 or 4 weeks before your father passed, I had spoken to him about coming on my radio show, and he had agreed. I think he reluctantly agreed, but he really probably wanted to jump at it. But things didn't work out that way. So now you are here representing him. Now, is this the award?
No.
That is. That is some information about the George Buzzell Scholarship.
Do you want to read it?
Yes. The George Buzzell Scholarship is scheduled to be launched in the spring of 2013 and will be awarded to a student or students who reside in Orleans County and plan to pursue higher education in a natural resource management related field. And at this time, we are pleased to announce that a venue for receiving donations toward the funding of this scholarship has been established. So we feel that after a couple years of working together and talking to community members, that we have things well underway. Individuals or organizations may make a tax-deductible donation payable to the Vermont Foundation for Agriculture and send it in care of Brandon Pogany at the Community National Bank in Derby, Vermont, and just designate on the check that it is going to the George Buzzell Scholarship Fund.
We can also have that shown on the screen, the address.
And people, are very anxious to participate in this.
Right.
We have people wanting to know when, where, how, and George may have thought one of his comments was that he didn't know if people would always remember him, but he had hoped that they would remember the feeling that they get going through their woodlot, that sense of reverence to all living and growing things. He felt that they would probably remember that, but not him. But I think George, we will have a surprise for him.
Absolutely.
That George maybe did not know how many people he impacted, and this is a way that we can keep him alive and address his feelings on the landscape and also education at all ages.
Now, Fern, what is a forester? What does a forester do?
Oh, he does a number of things. First of all, he's a good steward of our land. You want low impact on your land. You want a residual stand that's going to be there. That's your future. He always looked at forestry as managing a portfolio, and if your portfolio is not producing good dividends, then it's time to harvest some of that portfolio. However, if it's producing good yield, good growth, that's your interest for the future, and management is everything. One of the things that I teach is what George taught to my students. You take care of your forest, he'll take care of you. And not only is it the forest, but also your wildlife, your other natural resources that are out there. People like to hunt and fish, and good management takes care of all those things. It's just not one-sided, and this is what we've lost from the past. I think you hear these clear cuts, and we understand that's not the way. There's some places where clear cuts, that's the only way you can harvest and get regeneration, but not around here. And this is what his studies proved. Forestry is a lot of things, and as Colleen mentioned, the white cedar here in this area, it only grows in the 70-mile radius, and so we have to manage that. And for all times, if we overcut, then we're really in trouble. And if you overcut some places, then you change your wildlife aspect. What your holding capacity is for that area. So it's a little bit of everything. One of the things that George and I had talked about is land use. You have to know your soils, you have to know your waters, you have to know your slope. And all those things go into good management, and this is what my students learn. And whether they go on to become foresters or not, it doesn't matter. It's a skill they have, they will always use at home. And that's really what George is all about. It says, do something to have an impact for the future.
Now, did you know, Rebecca, because you knew him just as your father, but did you know the impact he was having out in the world?
I think I knew the impact, although not, as a child, I wasn't aware as much of the impact on local agriculture and forests. I knew that he was involved in the spruce budworm situation, gypsy moths. I heard a lot about gypsy moths, heard a lot about compartmentalization and other forestry related things. But when people met me and realized who my father was, it was more his sense of humor, the fact that he was very personable, very intelligent, and very generous that people remembered.
Right.
You know, George really cared about everybody in the whole county. One of the things that I remember very, very well is he was the instigator of putting up the sugar house at the fairgrounds, and he's the one that set that up. And he came to me, and we had a portable sawmill. He says, "Fern, do you mind if other schools from Orleans County come and help cut the wood so they can say they were part of that as well?" I said, "Absolutely." So students from Hazen came up, students from Lake Region came up, students from Craftsbury Academy came up and used our portable sawmill. My thought is, this is a county thing. This is the way George thought. It wasn't Newport. It wasn't one place or the other. It's everybody. And so one of the things we're going to do this summer when the fairgrounds opens, we are going to have a place where people can drop donations in for the George Buzzell Scholarship. That was his baby, and it will be there forever. And you know, it wasn't just my program involved, but it was building trades and metal fabrication, and he tried to involve everybody. He saw the need that we all work together towards things.
So we only have about 5 more minutes left. In thinking about the scholarship, what kind of student do you think would make the ideal recipient of it?
I think that as we're searching for scholarship applicants, we're going to be looking for somebody with integrity, with a good work ethic, somebody who does understand the importance of natural resource management and respecting and honoring the land. We're going to be looking for somebody who's diligent, and probably somebody who has more dimension to him or her, than a single-minded focus on resource management. Somebody who has some diverse interests.
Right.
I think of the student that helped put this together. He's in college right now for environmental studies and thinking about forestry, played in the band, loved art, did sports, very well motivated, and always looked to do his best on things. I mean, this is who George was,
right.
And we'd like to honor a student with this scholarship that exemplifies who George was. You know, who knows? Some of these kids that may be applying have great need for it, and so there has to be a need there as well. But we want to make certain that through all of Orleans County, and that could be a person from Hazen, that comes from Greensboro, Craftsbury Academy, Lake Region, and even the Christian Academy, and because they are from Orleans County, they're all involved. And this is one of the things we thought it should go to somebody there, not North Country necessarily, but all of those things, any one of those places.
Right.
That's what George would want.
Right. Now, is the Buzzell family going to have some say? Are you going to go over the list of recipients, of possible recipients?
I know that I've had the privilege of meeting with Fern and Colleen and other Natural Resources Advisory Board members as we have discussed the scholarship, developed the venue, and discussed the characteristics that are important.
Right.
So I know that we'll be able to have input into the scholarship application, and I believe it'll be Natural Resources Advisory Board members who will go through those applications.
Okay, as we wrap up, again, Colleen, how can people contribute to the scholarship fund?
Well, they can contribute. It's going to be through the Community National Bank in care of Brandon Pogany. Checks made out to the Vermont Foundation for Agriculture, marking in the memo line the George Buzzell Scholarship. We are ready to start accepting donations this very moment. I think some have probably already come in, and we're hoping to generate enough dollars to begin with some sort of award in 2013.
Right.
So it's an exciting time.
Okay, Rebecca, I'll give you the last word. How would you like to close?
I think that if this scholarship honors my dad's memory and allows an individual, or hopefully over the course of years, many individuals, to pursue higher education and then bring those educational gains back to our community in an ideal world, I think, for my dad. I think he'll be honored, and I think the family will be very pleased.
Okay, I want to thank you for coming on the show, and also thanking you for recognizing, I think, truly one of the great unsung heroes of Orleans County. And I want to thank the viewers for tuning in today.